Cliff Richard's life is often remembered through chart records, sold-out tours, and a smile that seemed permanently polished for the spotlight. But behind that carefully maintained image is a story shaped by longing, faith, resilience, and quiet endurance. From a childhood uprooted by the collapse of the British Empire to becoming the voice that gave Britain its first true rock and roll identity, Cliff's journey has never been simple. He loved deeply but privately, most famously in a bond that could never fully become what his heart hoped for. He rose to fame before the industry even knew how to handle someone like him, survived cultural shifts that erased many of his peers, and endured one of the most painful public ordeals any artist could face, without ever losing his belief or his dignity. This is not just the story of a pop star, it's the story of a man who kept standing when the world kept testing him. A love that never asked for attention. For Cliff Richard, love was never something to parade under flashing lights or glossy headlines. It was something quieter, heavier, and far more enduring. He never married and never had children. Yet for decades, he was presented to the world as the flawless, clean-cut idol who seemed untouched by longing or regret. Behind that familiar smile, however, lived a private ache that shaped the course of his life in ways few people truly understood. In 1971, Cliff invited a young Australian singer named Olivia Newton-John to appear on his television variety show. She was just 22, fresh-faced, softly spoken, and virtually unknown in Britain. From the moment she stepped into the spotlight, Cliff sensed something rare about her. Not just talent, but a presence that felt instinctive and lasting. Years later, he would say he knew immediately she would be a friend for life, though time would reveal that his feelings ran deeper than friendship alone. The timing, however, could not have been more unkind. Olivia was already engaged, and not to a stranger, but to Bruce Welch, Cliff's close friend and bandmate from the Shadows. Cliff chose restraint over desire, loyalty over confession. Even when Olivia and Bruce eventually separated in 1973, he did not step forward or rewrite history. Instead, he carried his feelings silently, allowing love to exist without possession. For more than 4 decades, Cliff and Olivia remained close collaborators and trusted companions, their voices blending with a tenderness that fans could feel but never fully explain. When they sang together, especially on songs like Suddenly, the emotion felt genuine because it was. In his autobiography decades later, Cliff acknowledged what he had long kept private, admitting that when many people were in love with Olivia, she belonged to someone else and his chance passed him by. He did not write with bitterness, only acceptance. Their final duet in 2015 at the Royal Albert Hall became an unknowing farewell. And when Olivia passed away in 2022, Cliff did not speak of death, only of life quietly stopping. It was the end of a love story that never truly began, yet never truly ended either. Born into a world already breaking, before the name Cliff Richard ever echoed through concert halls, there was a boy named Harry Roger Webb, born on October 14, 1940, in Lucknow, British India, during a time when the world itself seemed to be tearing at the seams. War raged across Europe, empires trembled, and uncertainty hung in the air long before Harry could understand it. His father worked for the Indian Railways, a position that gave the family relative comfort within the British colonial system, and, for a few early years, Harry's life unfolded amid warm verandas and household routine. But history does not pause for childhood. As India moved toward independence, unrest spread rapidly, and by the late 1940s, British families were urged to leave. In 1948, the Webbs boarded a crowded ship bound for England, leaving behind the only home Harry had ever known. The journey was long and disorienting, and when they arrived, England was nothing like the land they had imagined. Post-war Britain was gray, cold, and rationed, a sharp contrast to the color and warmth of India. The family settled into modest housing, where comfort was limited and adjustment unavoidable. For young Harry, This upheaval planted early lessons about loss, adaptation, and resilience. He was learning, without knowing it, how to survive transition, how to carry memory without being trapped by it, and how to keep moving forward when the world no longer resembled what it once was. Finding a voice in a silent country. By the time Harry Webb became Cliff Richard in the late 1950s, Britain had no true rock and roll identity of its own. American music dominated the airwaves, while British singers largely played it safe, offering polite tunes that appealed more to parents than teenagers. Cliff arrived not with polish, but with urgency. In 1958, he recorded a song called Move It, a raw, driving track that sounded unlike anything Britain had produced before. When a BBC broadcaster chose to play the B-side instead of the planned single, everything changed. Move It surged up the charts, becoming the first British-made rock song to break into the top ranks, and in that moment, Cliff didn't just become a star, he opened a door. On stage, he moved differently, sounded different, and carried a confidence that felt rebellious without being reckless. Teenagers responded instantly. They screamed, they copied his look, and they finally saw themselves reflected in their own music. With the shadows at his side, Cliff helped build the foundation for British youth culture itself, proving that Britain didn't need to borrow its voice anymore. It could create its own. From pop star to cultural force, Cliff's success didn't stop at music. He understood early that longevity required evolution, and film became his next frontier. His early movie roles were not chosen for ease or glamour, but for substance, often reflecting the tensions and hopes of young people navigating a changing society. Films like The Young Ones and Summer Holiday weren't just entertainment, they were cultural moments, capturing optimism at a time when Britain was learning to believe in itself again. Cliff's presence on screen was natural and grounded, never forced, and audiences responded in overwhelming numbers. By the early 1960s, he was not only topping charts but leading box offices, something no British pop star had done before. Importantly, this all happened before the Beatles reshaped the global music scene, placing Cliff firmly at the starting line of Britain's creative explosion. He wasn't following trends, he was helping create them. Faith, identity, and quiet conviction. In 1966, at the height of his fame, Cliff made a decision that surprised almost everyone. He publicly spoke about his Christian faith. At a time when pop culture was leaning into rebellion and excess, Cliff chose discipline, reflection, and spiritual honesty. He didn't withdraw from the spotlight, nor did he preach from it. Instead, he allowed his beliefs to quietly inform his choices, his music, and his life. Some fans drifted away, confused by the shift, but many stayed, drawn by his sincerity. Cliff later admitted that much of his earlier confidence had been an act, and that faith gave him something sturdier than applause, a sense of self not dependent on approval. He didn't abandon pop music, he deepened it, bringing maturity and intention into a space often driven by image alone. In doing so, he proved that success and conviction did not have to cancel each other out. Reinvention without disguise. By the mid-1970s, musical tastes had shifted dramatically, and Cliff was widely seen as yesterday's hero. Rather than retreat, he reinvented himself with care and intelligence. Songs like Devil Woman and We Don't Talk Anymore showcased a darker, more contemporary sound that resonated with new audiences while retaining his emotional core. These weren't nostalgia hits. They were modern, relevant, and confident. The success of these records re-established Cliff as a serious artist and reminded the industry that authenticity doesn't age. His comeback wasn't loud or desperate, but it was powerful because it was real. He adapted without losing himself, a balance few artists ever managed to strike. A trial of silence and strength. In 2014, Cliff's life was shaken by a highly public police investigation that unfolded publicly before any conclusions were reached. The experience was deeply distressing, not because of legal outcomes, but because of the sudden loss of privacy and control. No charges were ever brought, and the investigation eventually concluded with no action taken. However, the emotional impact was significant, and Cliff later spoke openly about the strain it placed on his health and sense of safety. He pursued legal action to address how the situation was handled, not out of anger, but out of a desire for fairness and accountability. The court ruled in his favor, affirming the importance of privacy and restraint, especially when no wrongdoing has been established. For Cliff, the episode was not about vindication, but about healing and restoring dignity after a deeply unsettling chapter. Legacy beyond applause. Today, Cliff Richard's legacy cannot be measured only in chart positions or sales figures, though they are remarkable. His story is one of endurance, restraint, and quiet courage. He lived with unspoken love, navigated public scrutiny with grace, and chose consistency over reinvention for its own sake. Through every era, he remained present, not louder than others, but steady. Cliff Richard did not chase history. He became part of it simply by staying true to himself. And perhaps that is why, after all these decades, his voice still feels familiar, not because it never changed, but because it always came from an honest,